Hello, and welcome to episode 21 of Poetry Worth Hearing, hosted by me, Kathleen McPhillamy, and with music by Alex Heen. This episode has plenty of variety, but we start with a feature by Alex Mazey, a young poet who's bringing out his first collection with Bad Betty Press next month. He talks about his influences and reads poems by himself and others. At the centre of the episode, we have a wonderfully eclectic bunch of poems on the theme of creature from Lizzie Ballagher, Pat Winslow, Fiona Perry, Roddy Maude-Roxby, Eva Wal, Deborah Cox, P Wren, Caroline Jackson-Houlston and Corinna Board. We finish with a few words of advice on how to present your poetry on audio by Richard Lister, who is himself very experienced in presenting his work and a regular contributor to Poetry Worth Hearing. Alex Mazey grew up in Oxford, but he studied creative writing at Staffordshire and Keele universities and then went on to teach English in China. His main influence is the French cultural critic Jean Baudrillard, an influence which emerges in his prose writings and his poetry. Alex's book, Ghost Lives, Cursed Edition, has been described as a singular fusion of visual and cute poetics. If you want something different, buy the book.
What were my early poetic influences? One of my earliest influences in regards to writing was actually getting bullied in the school library for reading Goosebumps books. Believe it or not, there was a kid who was very proud of himself for reading Terry Pratchett whilst I was still reading Goosebumps. So in many ways, this instigated a lifelong hatred of Terry Pratchett novels, alongside a desperate need to be sort of well-read, from which I would always be able to justify my interest in very lowbrow things like scary stories about snowmen who came to life. As for strict sort of poetic influences, when I was young, I didn't actually think people read poetry anymore. So you can imagine how shocked I was when I was forced to read a Carol Ann Duffy collection at school. I suppose I read some other contemporary poetry and in my foolish arrogance thought, oh, I might be able to do that too. Beyond that, you might remember the Borders bookshop in Oxford before it closed down. It was huge, maybe 3 floors, a basement, and it would stay open to midnight or something. Well, I used to enjoy reading. I used to go into the basement there and sort of like hide in a corner and read, usually like translated Japanese fiction. So I read novels like Battle Royale and some Yukio Mishima in the basement there until late. And I mean, that pretty much sums up my earliest influence as a writer. So I suppose it was sort of like I was left unsupervised in a bookshop. This was before the gradual disappearance of chairs from bookshops, which is probably a good thing since Borders isn't there anymore and is kind of indicative of a world, sort of indicative of the world that Borders became a express supermarket selling meal deals. So yeah, I sort of embody a cliche in poetry where I didn't get into poetry, rather poetry got into me. It's been a bit of a demiurge that's haunted me ever since, and I'm not sure I recommend it. In terms of writers who are of a continuing importance, I think there's a forgotten appreciation of philosophy as poetry. And I think the most significant writer in my life has been, of course, Jean Baudrillard, whose style is as aggravating as it is poetic. What's interesting about Baudrillard is that he actually thought the world might be redeemed by what he called a poetic reversal. So make of that what you will. It seems to me that notable philosophers of the contemporary always have an intellectual touchstone of sorts. So in the case of Byung-Chul Han, that's probably Heidegger, or in the case of someone like Slavoj Zizek, that might be Hegel. In my case, this sort of plays out obviously as an affinity for with Baudrillard's work, when it comes to thinking about the world, the aesthetics, semiotics, and things of that nature. In terms of contemporary poetry, actual contemporary poets, when I was 17, I read Tao Lin's poetry collection, You Are a Little Bit Happier Than I Am. And that fundamentally changed how I thought you could write poetry. So I still have the first edition, actually. I think the book came out in 2006. I must have got it a year later, but it's first edition. I don't think I've opened this book for a long time. So I'm just gonna, I think, read the first poem from that collection. This is called Some of My Happiest Moments in Life Occur on AOL Instant Messenger. I will create a new category on my Instant Messenger buddy list. I will call it People I Like Who Don't Like Me Back. And I will move your screen name into that group. And I will invite you to my house and show you. And you will say, if I didn't like you, why did I come over? And you will look at my face. And I will have an honest answer for your question. I will tell you that you came over to be polite. And after a while, you will go home. And you won't call. And I won't either. And after a while, I won't like you anymore. And after a while, we'll forget each other. And after a while, you will be beautiful and alone inside of your coffin. And I'll be cold and alone inside of my coffin. That is probably the kind of poem you want to read at 17. But I don't actually think reading Cowlin's work was a particularly unique experience, and I think a lot of readers of a certain generation feel in some ways attached to his work. So it's been kind of nice watching him progress from that kind of poem to something perhaps a little bit more optimistic. And I mean, I wish I could rattle off the list of hidden gems in poetry, but really I'm quite basic in the sense that I mean, one of my favorite collections recently was Ocean Vuong's A Night Sky with Exit Wounds. I suspect most listeners will be quite familiar with that collection. So I'm actually going to read a poem from one of John Berryman's students, Philip Levine. Philip Levine was often praised by critics for having what they called a living syntax. And I think that's always been something I've tried to emulate in my own work. So this poem is from The Simple Truth, and I'm going to read the title poem, I think, from this collection. The Simple Truth. I bought $1.50 worth of small red potatoes, took them home, boiled them in their jackets, and ate them for dinner with a little butter and salt. Then I walked through the dry fields on the edge of town. In middle June, the light hung on the dark furrows at my feet, and in the mountain oaks overhead, the birds were gathering for the night. The jays and mockers squawking back and forth, the finches still darting into the dusty light. The woman who sold me the potatoes was from Poland. She was someone out of my childhood in a pink spangled sweater and sunglasses, praising the perfection of all her fruits and vegetables at the roadside stand, and urging me to taste even the pale, raw sweet corn trucked all the way, she swore, from New Jersey. Eat, eat, she said. Even if you don't, I'll say you did. Some things you know all your life. They are so simple and true. They must be said without elegance, meter, and rhyme. They must be laid on the table beside the salt shaker, the glass of water, the absence of light gathering in the shadows of picture frames. They must be naked and alone. They must stand for themselves. My friend Henry and I arrived at this together in 1965, before I went away, before he began to kill himself, and the two of us to betray our love. Can you taste what I'm saying? It is onions or potatoes, a pinch of simple salt, the wealth of melting butter. It is obvious. It stays in the back of your throat like a truth you never uttered because the time was always wrong. It stays there for the rest of your life, unspoken, made of that dirt we call earth, the metal we call salt, in a form that we have no words for, and you live on it. Yeah, I mean, that poem, I haven't read that poem for a long time, but I sort of 10 years ago when I read that, it again was, I suddenly knew what poetry could be. So it was very important for me. But I mean, like I said, I'm sort of basic when it comes to contemporary poetry, which is why it's sort of funny that I ended up writing something more hybrid and more visual when it came to Ghost Lives Cursed Edition, the forthcoming collection from Bad Betty Press. I mean, the most significant influence on my poetry here, in this collection especially, is actually the Gnosticism of William Blake, believe it or not. But saying that, one of my biggest influences is actually from outside of poetry, and it's actually the fictional character Hello Kitty. So there you go, the cat's out of the bag with that one. I suppose I wanted to create something playful in a landscape where everything is allegedly very vital, and every poem today is very urgent, and everything is the greatest collection since, sliced bread. I think there's a great deal of rhetoric in selling poetry today. You're often told how to feel about this or that collection in advance. So I suppose my message then is go into my poetry not expecting much of anything, and maybe with any luck, you'll come out pleasantly surprised. With that being said, I would like to read my poem, Kaczynski's Day. Ted Kaczynski is, of course, known to many as the Unabomber, a domestic terrorist who lived in the wilderness, writing on themes of the ecology. He sent bombs in the mail, but nevertheless likely killed, or at least likely bombed less innocent people than the military-industrial complex likely bombs on a daily basis. He died in prison last year, but his famous line from the manifesto, "Industrial Society and Its Future," lives on in memes everywhere. So this is Kaczynski's Day. The fire in my stove on a day in January. A sure quantity of rolled oats, spoonfuls of sugar and a rough quantity of milk. While the oats are cooling, I eat a piece of cold meat, yesterday's old rabbit. When the fire burns, it's back into bed. Every day it's like the sky can get lighter. When I wake again, when it is here, it is no longing snowing through to the heat of kerosene lamps, and I am alone forever. The sky is clear, a single shot 22 to pierce the snow with our feet, to see, to listen to the open forest of lodgepole pines, a wooden cartridge box, a black eye, and the black-tipped ears noticed first. It is right here, the entire world, beside a fallen pine 40 feet away, far from the ridges of cold snow, of cold meat. Ordinarily behind the eye, once exchanged, for the spirit of a snowshoe bounces snow with its last life, follows me in noosed cords, follows a tutelary spirit, the green needle in my mittened hand. Such an ordinary kill, to lie down in the snow silence as death does. The noise, root produce washed in meltwater, motions of an axe between wood, a clear shot, pine cones falling like the chores performed. To lie amongst the peeling skins, the smell, the bright violence of dead animals, the tubes and mechanisms of a soup's gentle simmering. The next poem I would like to read, also from the forthcoming collection, is a poem dedicated to Belle Delphine, a very mischievous performance artist known for the commodification and sale of her own bathwater. I've chosen to read this poem because I think the cute accelerationism that Belle Delphine has come to emblemise stands on the other side of Ted Kaczynski's deep ecology, and I think together they represent a culture of extremes. Interestingly enough, this poem was considered more controversial than the last because I think we are perhaps more comfortable with the violence of terrorism today than we are with the idea of someone selling their bathwater. Just for added controversy then, this is also a poem that rhymes. Bathwater for Belle Delphine. An oor of your soapy self, a fragrance candy-like, rare as an autumn dragonfly, this glass with blue and pink appearance, how'd a liquid many were saddened by. Holy water by holy saint besmirched, condensed milk-shaped thing of mirth, price plus shipping, Google searched, cat-eared cherubim descending to earth. As this water also to captivate deviously, through a glass not so dark but clearly. I stay in praise of shadows, kawaii uru, virtual paradise like a beach in Honolulu. Like rhyming poems and ghosts, it is often said that some topics you shouldn't, under any circumstances, write about in poetry. It is for that reason the final poem I would like to read is even more controversial than the last two, since it is a poem that concerns the extremely heretical topic of flowers. This poem is one of those trendy after poems. So this poem is after Genshin Impact, which is a popular free-to-play video game where you can do all kinds of things like collect flowers. I think it's interesting that we live in an age where those flowers that are disappearing in the natural world inevitably reappear in a virtual one. And so in many ways, this poem concerns the reterritorialization of flowers. It's called Astral Arrangement, after Genshin Impact. Water lily in pale green, an arrangement in millennial pink, red eyes watching you push up daisies. Another day, you're as blue as the flowers. A gentle halation in the style of Chibashi, swaying under the moon. Blue like lapis lazuli, lilies as a lonely wanderer. Silk flower up close. Some colours are rarest in nature. Goodbye, colours.
Well, thank you, Alex. And if you want to find out more about Alex and his work, go to poetryworthhearing.biz. When I suggested creature as the theme for this month's podcast, I was hoping for more than poems about pets. And I think you will agree that this collection includes a rich variety of approaches, from poems which are about animals, cute or otherwise, to poems which explore the creature in ourselves, and those which question the survival of all that is creaturely. We begin by welcoming back Lizzie Ballagher with 4 wonderful poems.
Seal. You taught me to search for seals in unexpected places. One winter day, slick in a slack tide beside gravel dumps in the muddy estuary of the Thames. A sleek head bobbing. You saw him first. Then none again, not one, until near your life's close, when in a place we counted holy, cliffs plunging headlong into the chop and slap of a summer sea, and clouds curtaining the Exmoor sky in holiday mockery, when we were grumbling about unseasonal cold, a grey seal raised her head, just yards from where we stood on the shoreline, watched us, inquisitive. Shoulder deep in brisk waves, our daughter turned. The seal swam round her, garlanded her legs, clapped for her to frolic in the water. They played. No one spoke. We held our breaths. Today is animal. The furred tongue of torpid heat licks, laps me round, unwelcome blanket in the furnace of the day. Even at daybreak, skies steam. The dragon breath of dawn kindles. Thunder stamps, rocks earth. Chasing its tail, wind snorts, shakes dust. Lightning kicks from hangdog clouds. Herds of cumulonimbus bellow over the day's slow savannah. When nights wheel with stars, fireflies ignite tiger eyes in striped thorn scrub. Sudden dusk cowers down. In the rippling, muscular presence of midsummer, I crouch, stop still, quiver. Newts. They come in spring by night, without a sound, dun and silver shadows slipping between last year's rotten leaves, when flag irises shoot yellow arrows, when mud begins to warm, when the water's just right, when the moon's in the best quarter. One morning later, I see delicate toes splayed on the surface as they feed, turn, dive, leaving thin trails of bubbles. They are acrobats, quick silver in the dark tent of spring's fevered lake. I bear. In wilderness silence, I hear you, your stealth, as so clumsily you swish across the ice. Man, whatever you think, this is not your kingdom, nor your realm to claim, but mine. Trespass on the northern ice and you'll learn my speed, fast as Boreas, glissando. You'll learn my need of sweetest flesh. Watch as I wait at seals' tight breathing holes. You'll turn to face my patient stalking, taste the bite of my keen teeth, the grip of jaws to clamp, strip you to snow bones. Then you will know the clutch of my fierce claws. I bear am sure-footed, loping, loping. I bear do not grow weary, do not grow wet, and need no water. Do not turn bleary, do not go blind in blizzards white. I bear need little light in my ice-bright province to search you out. I bear can smell my prey from 20 miles away when I face into the whetted knives of wind. Beware, you silky seal, and humankind unkind, you are my choicest meal. I bear will search you out, tear you. Beware.
Our next poet is Pat Winslow. She has 5 poems, which range from sharp-eyed naturalism to a brush with the surreal to some grim humour.
Pheasant in the frost. You stand, feet hooked to hard tussock, head a daub of jam on a strip of clotted cream, body a plump oval of tawny gold. You peck half-heartedly and move off, flapping to keep warm. Every living thing knows what it must do. The pussy willow is locked in, trees hold fast to leaf and bud, crows and gulls scope the land, and you peck, 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 until a dog walker makes you chortle in panic and rise into a hedge, leaving behind a fine feather for a Sunday hat. Peewits. Because they swung down like pendulums from east to west, and the straight line of an aeroplane was anathema to their strategy, because the strategy relied on swoop, cry, roll, and rise again, and their wings were flat and round as spatulas, because their whoops were electronic and not small and twittery, and they wore crests like exotic hats, because they strutted like grandmothers looking for china in a car boot sale, and were twitchier than your average twitcher and hunkered low, because the floodplain glittered with sunshine, and the grass revealed itself, and the river was full of sky, and the mayflies were dancing, and the hawthorns smelt of urinals but still looked cheerful, and the post-van disappeared over the hill, and the rim of a bicycle wheel gleamed as it leaned against the hedge, and the wind was gentle, and the air was warm, and they were everywhere. The Sisters, after Aardvark Groomed by Widows, a painting by Leonora Carrington. They come to the golden ark, milk creatures, yielding to the bosom, the proffered spoon and terracotta bowl, to be brothed in salt and herbs, washed clean. Snouty gatherers wait their turn. A calf hangs limp. There's an art to the soft wimpled gaze into nothing. A nun sweeps the past into enchantment. All death is magic. The care of the living must go on, a thing with wings, a steadying hand on a broad white back, acts of simplicity. Praise those whose task it is to mend and send away. Praise the ministry of ochre, dust and clay. The Chewing Factory. Slab heads, great hoofy chunk beasts, hefty heaving through iron gates to the field, their mouths set to work immediately, a fugue that synchronizes like clocks. Again and again their muscular tongues renew the gleam of their nostrils, their bodies are huge maps rippling in the sun, continents and islands straddling white sea. Hay barn stomachs dance the grass about, cuds emerge like tight wads of Kleenex. All day they stand, their gable ends to the wind, eyeing the world and magnifying it. It's a miracle how grass gets to be so fat, how sap ends up creamy suds in my blue jug. To a pig in time of trouble. Do not go to that well-done edge of time, to the steamy conveyor belt of sliced white and department store wallets. Keep shoveling leaves and kitchen parings, up to your shanks in mucky water, your flank sides wobbling, your thick skin scumbly with pellety ticks chasing between the paintbrush hairs. Stay, Sete One, put your neat trotters to the ground and dig deep. Be a refusenik. Who will make mini tornadoes of hay and rattle the gates with its pudding head? Don't let them chop you into pretty pieces, my kettle truffler, my bucket skirmisher. Play dead. Lie piggo. Run away.
And now, Fiona Perry.
Animal within an animal. In the middle of the flanks of women lies the womb, an animal within an animal. Mine wandered around my body, coordinates unknown, a displacement that caused a tendency to make trouble for others. So relentless efforts were made to anchor it into a more suitable position, to stave off licentiousness, to stem the flow of hysterical suffocation, to convert lasciviousness into maternal care. Once again, the man downstairs adjusts his tie in the looking glass. All mustachioed authority and advanced scientific knowledge. He is here to coax and cajole that wild beast with fetid and rank smells to the nostrils. Tallow candle when it is blown out, vapour of birds' feathers, especially partridge or woodcock, of man's hair or goat's hair, of dead mouseling, of pig trotter and such like. But my pet refused to return unto its own place, even when they lowered my body into a bath of lungwort, juniper, fleabane, camphire and green anise boiled in water. She shifted only slightly, pricked her ears when offered sweet and aromatic fumigations. Hither and thither she flailed, so I tore the whalebone from my belly, mounted my broodmare and galloped away. In the medical notes, perplexed, they surmised this untamable creature remains a spinning needle on a compass.
Next, perhaps a little less problematic, Roddy Maude-Roxby writes about a cat.
Mostly cats. The cat looks round the door, makes eye contact and retreats, as if he had something to say without the means to speak. The little female enters now, while I am still in bed. She pushes with her head, my hand responds. Her front paws pump my chest, as if expecting milk. She bites at my diary bookmark to catch anything ribbon-like. At last, or at least, she settles now on the rocking chair to sleep. No use to say stop it to a cat. Dogs know words unknown by cats. Cats purr, of course. Dogs use their eyebrows. Cats are somewhat like the weather, maybe sunny all day.
Eva Wal is a German artist and poet who writes in both German and English. This poem, which is in English only, is by an alter ego, Eva Wal, who to date has written only this poem.
The Whale in the Void. The glazing of pain shimmering in a great cold. Peter Huchel. Once my psychotherapist told me that pain caused by emotions had exactly the same effect on the body as physical pain. I used to throw away letters of my mother unopened. Ventriloquist letters, tale-telling its toxic content. Finally, I banned my mother. Since I changed my surname, I have received all kinds of whale gifts, as my chosen name is Whale. I chose it because at that time whales were my saviors in the abyss of dreams. Today I open my mother's Christmas present, and another whale appears, freed from his brown paper shell, shimmering on the cover of a book. This whale is here to fill the chilly, peaceful void the ban had kept open for so many years. He's the messenger, the transmitter of my mother's words. His blow falls over me like a shower of crushed ice. The unrequited love of a mother who never gave birth to a whale. The hunted, the harpooned, the humiliated, the almost extinguished creature, the feared Leviathan, the target. We are harmless, don't you see? Did you know a whale's skin is as thin as a paper tissue? Yet it can wear scars like a million interwoven ways of figure skaters on the vast polar ice. The whale's got big fat to store memories, hurts, violation, the unrequited love of a child. The whale's body used to be industrially exploited, a reminiscence of the utmost cruelty of war. Flesh and bone and blubber turned into gelatin, margarine, make-up, lamp and lubricating oil, soap, fodder, insecticide, nitroglycerin. It wasn't his fault. How the pain rises, grows, spreads, roots, bones, needles, stings, fingering, nailing, teething, biting, bitching, pinching, drilling, moving inside the flesh, cutting it up, never leaving, usurping, numbing the brain, silencing the tongue, swallowing words, gulping guts, looming, smouldering, scolding, freezing, moulding, rusty, blood-red dark, conjuring all colours to buzzing white, glistening, blistering, bursting, yelling, screaming, hoarse, harsh, hush, 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 hush. Can the size of a fully grown blue whale ever be an exaggeration? He's diving deep, ready to forgive, but he never forgets. She has sunk. She is in the abyssal sea, flawless, painless, motionless. She is just there, floating in the currents. She comes again, blows fantastic, majestic fountains of water, forever proud and beautiful. A marvel of the ocean, a mammal at home in two worlds or none. Thaw wind sweeps over the traces of figure skaters holding each other tight, and the blue whale is my saviour again. I keep the book and send the letter back.
Now, a poem from Deborah Cox.
God's creature. An odd creature has joined our church. She has Medusa hair. Though manicured, she has green skin. She isn't quite all there. At first we thought she was naive, but now we know her plan. She wants to turn our men to stone, but we hold all the stones. She'll take you with her eyes, she will. Her feet lead straight to hell. We've studied both her eyes and feet. They never can keep still. We killed that character today with just a look or two. False sympathy, a prayer request, passed on from pew to pew.
Well, that was mysterious. Next, mystery of a different kind, as Stephen Wren gives us a poem riddle.
Inside creature. The glass encloses me. I share tetrahedra with other particles. My lap is silicate. A local order beams to form a non-crystal. The glass exhibits me. My pliancy has tongues, and sounds do detonate. My face is moving charge. The world beyond the glass cannot detect my frame. The glass unfreezes me. I try so hard to pose as one being with heart. I cry on other motes.
Caroline Jackson-Houlston needs no introduction from me, as here she very effectively introduces herself.
Hello, I'm Caroline Jackson-Houlston. As an eco-poet, most of my writing is about the relations between the natural world and the now rather less natural human beings that share it. I frequently use dramatic monologues to construct different, though necessarily artificial, viewpoints. These pieces are from projected collections. The first is likely to be part of an illustrated pamphlet based on the prompts for a day at a science fair encouraging children to write about nature. The second comes from a fully drafted but as yet unpublished book, 50% Banana. May Day Bank Holiday, Port Meadow 2020, a Robin photographer interchange. Climate change cancelled all my Christmas gigs. You know the stuff. Snow-covered holly twigs topped with a robin. That's my classic pose. No work last winter due to lack of snows. May is usually the cute nestling spot. With 60 kph of gale, it's not. With every worm and insect out of sight, how come I'm here, up to my knees in white? Because it's not snowflakes. It's hawthorn flowers. It's just tree dandruff coming down in showers. You've a bright notion for a piquant shot? Stand on that lily pad. No, I will not. Because they're the monopoly of frogs. The industry is going to the dogs. Hardline nature equities union rules. No frogs on holly, no robins in pools, even on May confettied lily leaves. Don't get me started. You would not believe the intellectual property and patent jungle out there. It's nothing but a blatant suppression of the artiste's right to choose by multinationals. Protest is no use. The bright side's double rates for videos. They forecast snow. It's cold enough, God knows. Oh, quick! There's a jogger coming! Take your snap! 2 profiles, 1 head on. Call that a wrap. To a mouse, on turning it out of its nest in the dairyole moulds. It's got to go! The mouse is living in the oven, in the plate warmer, with the cake tins. We tried violence last time. My husband cornered the previous one with an air rifle, in the open country of the lowest bookshelf, between the complete works of Oscar Wilde and the plug sockets. It faced him down. 3 inches of teenage woodmouse triggered paralysing existential guilt, long enough for a dash to P.G. Wodehouse and a vanishing act. So, this time, it was the live trap. Then decanting you into the small pet carrier, shivering at the relentless light, the incomprehensible all-round air of the Perspex walls. We let you out, 2 miles away, in a lay-by, with burying trees and 6 foot of dry ditch, and even a waste bin. Was this a bracing freedom from enclosure? or an extreme rendition, handing you over to chill deracination like a tiny John Clare.
Our last three poems come from Corinna Board, whose just published pamphlet, Arboreal, is highly recommended.
Cowrie. Under the egg-smooth dome, a pair of serrated lips, a mollusk portcullis protecting your long-gone tenant. You sat on Nan's top shelf, crouching tiger, empty husk, too precious to play with. I remember how it felt to touch you, the electric thrill as I ran my fingers over your knife-edge opening, pressed your coolness to my cheek, tried to understand how you could hold an ocean. Brown-banded carder-bee. I scoop it up with a leaf in case it isn't dead. Its wings askew whiff, sugar glass brittle, body curled into a question mark, coated in russet fuzz. I explore its mechanics with a pencil tip, the impossible ratio of abdomen to wing, eyes bright little pins, antennae a Dali moustache. If you'd never seen a bee, it might seem otherworldly, an alien life form, or a minuscule spaceship crashed on the grass. But it's a dead bumblebee. Nothing on earth can jumpstart its stalled machinery. Silverfish. If the moon were a creature, she'd be you. Waning crescent, quicker than Mercury, midnight dancer, dusting fingertips with constellations of precious metal. Little fish, sliver of shimmer, floorboard swimmer, you show off your silver, then disappear, just like her.
Poetry Worth Hearing has as its raison d'etre the desire to hear poets reading their own poems and realising the full auditory value of their work. Most of our poets do just that, but if you should be hesitating about submitting to Poetry Worth Hearing, here is some advice from Richard Lister, a regular contributor with a lot of experience in presenting his work in auditory form.
It was first song. Suggestions for reading poetry out loud. J.L. Borges says poetry always remembers that it was an oral art before it was a written art. It remembers that it was first song. I wonder, can you recall listening to someone as they skillfully brought out the shades and echoes of a poem? I think, for instance, of Seamus Heaney reading his piece Digging. We know when reading's done well, and when it's not, when a well-honed poem gets lost in drab delivery or distracting verbal tics. As I reflect on my experience of reading poetry and giving presentations, and on wisdom from others, I find that a number of themes emerge about how to read well. I think of the 5 ideas that I'm focusing on as 5 helium balloons that can help your poems to take flight. Dance with your tone. I think of a poet I admire whose work is skillfully crafted, poignant, evocative. But when he reads his poetry in an unvaried monotone, the wonders of his work, sadly, become lost. We need to enunciate each word and give variety, speaking at times slightly higher or lower, bringing out something of the emotion of the piece and of the confidence or tentativeness of the poem's speaker. Make the most of changes of pace and pauses. John Williams says, "Often poets rush through each piece, as if trying to squeeze as much into the allotted reading time as possible. But all literature, especially poetry, requires breathing room for the audience to consider each image and concept before moving on to the next. Roughly 120 words per minute can be a good pace for reading poetry." Pauses are an essential part of conveying meaning. I find it helpful to print out a poem and use simple marks to show where I want to speak a bit quicker, where to provide emphasis by slowing down, and where I need to pause. Take a bath in your poem and refine it through play. Before you read, it's wise to immerse yourself in a poem's imagery and emotions, like soaking yourself in a bath until the waters become part of you. And when you read, try speaking as if to one friend held in your mind's eye. How about playing with different ways of delivering the words? Susan Dugdale of the website Write Out Loud suggests having fun, seeing what happens if you stress this word rather than that word. Say your poem as many ways as you can. Say it loud, say it soft. Say it gathering speed, getting faster and faster. Say it slow and low. Say it with a silly accent. In short, have fun with it. Experiment and record what you do. Take the ways that work. Don't chuck attention in the bin. I'm 17, sat in an A-level maths lesson taught by Father O'Shea. He can't remember our names, so he makes up ones, like Professor McSwedenpipes. He's a delightful, warm guy who somehow manages each time to get covered in blackboard chalk. But I often get distracted from the beauty of maths by his verbal tic of saying "okay" in pretty much every sentence. I wonder what verbal habits you might need to be wary of. Perhaps speaking too quietly or too loud, often saying or dropping your voice as you reach the end of lines. And we need to be careful when we're recording poems of other things that can throw our readers' attention, such as the sound of a passing lorry or slamming door, or the surprisingly loud noise that flapping your papers can make. Practice and ponder and practice again. John Dewey says, "We do not learn from experience, we learn from reflecting on experience." Listening to recordings of us reading our poems can be a valuable way to sharpen our skills. Perhaps even better insights can come from asking for feedback. Find a friend who you can trust to both encourage you with specific things you do well and identify where you need to refine your approach. So to summarize, there are 5 themes or helium balloons that can help your poetry readings to take to the wind. Dance with your tone. Make the most of changes of pace and pauses. Take a bath in your poem and refine it through play. Don't chuck attention in the bin. Practice and ponder and practice again. I wonder which of these 5 themes sounds most useful for you to try. I'll end with a quote from Edward Hirsch. "Reading poetry is an adventure in renewal, a creative act, a perpetual beginning, a rebirth of wonder."
The one piece of advice I would give in addition is, be yourself. Don't be afraid to be yourself. I delight in the different and individual voices I have encountered when making these podcasts. That's it for this time. Remember, more information about poets and their publications, as well as text of unpublished poems, can be found at poetryworthhearing.biz.